In a quiet, forgotten corner of the world, there was a small village, and in that village, there lived a man. No one knew his real name, they just called him the door opener. He wasn't a priest, offering salvation from a pulpit. He wasn't a healer, mending broken bones or curing fevers with herbs. He was something else entirely, something much, much darker. His house stood at the edge of the village, leaning into the woods as if it were trying to escape the sunlight. It was a place children dared each other to touch, a place adults spoke of in hushed, nervous tones. Because after the sun bled out of the sky and the moon cast its pale light, his work would begin. Late at night, when the rest of the village was asleep, strangers would find their way to his door. Their knuckles would rap against the old wood, a sound swallowed by the darkness. These weren't ordinary visitors. They were people pushed to the very edge of their lives, their hearts heavy with desperation. There was the farmer whose crops had failed for 3 seasons straight, his family's bellies aching with hunger. He came seeking a fortune, a miracle to turn his dusty fields green. Then there was the jilted lover, her heart a shattered mess, crying for the one who had left her. She came begging for a spell to bring him back, to bind his heart to hers forever. And there were others, their faces etched with a thirst for vengeance, whispering names of those who had wronged them, their eyes glinting with a dangerous fire. No matter who they were or what they wanted, the door opener's greeting was always the same. He would open the door, just a crack, his face hidden in the shadows, and his voice, a low rasp like stones grinding together, would utter the same chilling sentence: "Every door opens." But every door takes something, a promise and a warning, tangled together. One moonless night, a new knock echoed. It was softer than the others, hesitant. When he opened the door, a young woman stood there, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. She wasn't seeking wealth or love or revenge. Her request was different. She wanted to talk to someone who had passed away years ago, someone she missed with an ache that time had failed to heal. A smile stretched across the door opener's face. It was a terrifying sight, a smile too wide, too sharp to belong to a human. It split his face in the gloom, an unnatural crescent of white. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. He simply stepped aside and let her in. The inside of his house was just as unsettling as the outside. The air was thick and heavy, smelling of dust, decay, and something else. Something sweet and cloying, like wilting flowers on a grave. He led her to the center of the main room, where the floorboards were bare and stained. With a piece of chalk, he drew a large, intricate circle on the floor. It wasn't a simple shape. It was a complex web of symbols and lines that seemed to twist and writhe under the flickering lamplight. Around the circle, he placed 5 thick, black candles and lit them one by one. The flames didn't dance. They stood eerily still, casting long, distorted shadows that climbed the walls like grasping fingers. Then he began to whisper. The words that left his lips didn't belong to any language she had ever heard. They were guttural, ancient sounds that seemed to vibrate in the very air around them, making the hair on her arms stand on end. The room grew cold, a sudden, biting chill that seeped into her bones, making her shiver uncontrollably. The black candle flames, which had been so steady, suddenly bent sideways, as if a powerful gust of wind was blowing through the sealed room. They flickered wildly, and the shadows they cast contorted into monstrous shapes. And then she heard it, a soft, wet sound. Someone else was breathing in the room with them. It was a slow, shallow breath, right behind her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure terror. She spun around, her eyes darting into the darkness. But there was no one there. The space behind her was empty. But the breathing didn't stop. It grew closer, and closer. She could almost feel it on the back of her neck, a ghostly puff of air. It was a sound that didn't belong to the living world, and it was getting louder, more insistent, right beside her ear. At that moment, the door opener's voice cut through her panic, a low, triumphant whisper. I opened the door. Now you must pay the price. Her gaze was drawn to the wall. Her own shadow, which had been still, and thus a moment before, began to move. It squirmed and stretched, distorting its shape, growing longer and thinner, its limbs elongating across the walls like a living, inky creature. It was her silhouette, but it was moving on its own, independent of her. With a final, sickening pull, it detached itself from the floor completely. Her shadow peeled away from her feet and stood up. It stood there in the center of the room, a perfect, three-dimensional void in the shape of a woman. It had her form, her hair, her clothes. But it didn't have her eyes, where her eyes should have been. They were just empty, dark pits that seemed to drink the light from the room. The shadow turned its head and looked at her. It raised a hand, mirroring her own terror-stricken gesture. The door opener raised his hand and, with a single puff of breath, blew out the candles. The room plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. There was a scream. A short, sharp cry of pure horror that was cut off abruptly. Then, silence. A few moments later, a single candle flickered back to life. The room was empty, save for two figures. The door opener stood by the circle, his wide smile gone, replaced by a look of quiet satisfaction. And standing across from him was the other figure. It wasn't the young woman, it was her shadow, now solid and real, casting a faint shadow of its own in the candlelight. Since that night, the story has become a chilling legend in the village. They say if you're foolish enough to walk past the door opener's house after midnight, when the world is quiet and the veil between worlds is thin, you might see him standing by his window. But he's never alone. If you look closely, you'll see a second shadow standing just behind him, a dark silhouette that follows his every move. A shadow that never belonged to him. A constant, silent reminder that every door he opens takes something in return. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy stories that explore the darkness, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more tales from the shadows. We'll see you in the next one.